Happy New Year, and welcome back to Andrea Gamero Coaching and NoPainAllGain.ca. Today we're going to be discussing grief. No one wants to say goodbye to the ones we love the most. And whether your relationship was in good standing or not when your loved one dies, it really doesn't matter. It hurts just the same. And the amount of time that it's going to take for your mind to adjust to them not being around anymore really all lays in the tools you have to manage your grief and to start adjusting to life without them. So here are some tools that you can use to help you manage your grief and return to the joy that you want in life. What is grief? According to the American Psychological Association definition of grief that was adapted from the APA Dictionary of Psychology, grief is the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. Grief often includes psychological distress, separation anxiety, confusion, yearning, obsessive dwelling on the past, and apprehension about the future. Intense grief can become life-threatening through disruption of the immune system, self-neglect, and suicidal thoughts. Grief may also take the form of regret for something lost, remorse for something done, or sorrow for a mishap to oneself. So grief can take many forms, but the important thing to realize is that grief is a normal human reaction to loss. There's no one perfect way to express your grief, but there are healthy and unhealthy ways to do it. So when our minds don't know how to process trauma and grief, it can turn into PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. Now that is a topic for a different video. So today we're just going to be focusing on grief and practical ways that we can handle them. What are the stages of grief? Well, depending on the psychologist that you speak with or the article that you've just Googled on the net, you can come from any number of stages of grief depending on who you're talking to. But the standards are a 5-step or a 7-step set of stages for grief. So let's go through what those are. So according to a great article called The Stages of Grief and What to Expect by Kimberly Holland, there are 2 different formats that can be considered. The Kubler-Ross's 5 stages include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The 7 stages of grief are another model of explaining the many complicated experiences of loss, and these 7 stages include acceptance and hope. So this is a very gradual acceptance of the new way of life and a feeling of possibility for the future. 2, shock and denial. This is the state of disbelief and numbed feelings. Pain and guilt. You may feel that the loss is unbearable and that you're making other people's lives harder because of your feelings and needs. Anger and bargaining. You may lash out, telling God or a higher power that you'll do anything they ask if they'll only grant you relief from the feelings or the situation. Depression, and this may be a period of isolation and loneliness during which you process and reflect on the loss. The upward turn. At this point, the stages of grief like anger and pain have died down and you're left in a more calm and relaxed state. And stage 7 would be the reconstruction and working through it. You can begin to put pieces of your life back together and move forward. The important thing to recognize in whichever model of or stages of grief that you want to follow is that there is no set order that these stages will come in for you. You may have some and not others, and that's completely normal. So, and there's also no perfect way to manage your grief. The important thing is that you don't bury your grief, that you do find a way to go through it and process it no matter how long it takes for you so that you can start living life to its fullest as soon as possible. So with the research that I've done on grief and how to process through it, here are my top 10 tips for managing your grief. Number 1, allow yourself to grieve. 2, show yourself grace when grief pops up out of nowhere. 3, acknowledge that grief is normal. 4, be willing to talk through your grief with others. 5, journal about your thoughts and feelings. Number 6, create a list of positive memories of that person. 7, forgive them and yourself for any unresolved issues. 8, accept that death is a part of life. 9, children need to hear the truth no matter how many times they ask. And 10, cling to your faith in God. An important thing to note with this is that these are in no particular order, so just go ahead and mix and match with whichever ones work best for you. Let's start with number 1. Allow yourself to grieve. Different cultures have different ways that they deal with grief. Some have long, detailed, traditional processes and ceremonies that must happen in order to properly grieve a loved one, while other cultures employ more of a keep a stiff upper lip and don't tell anybody about how you're feeling. So whichever one you belong in, just know that you don't have to follow that specific cultural way to deal with grief, because having that stiff upper lip and not discussing it and don't tell anybody how you feel, that's really not a healthy way for you to grieve. And when you try to bottle up your feelings and don't let anybody know about it, it's going to explode in the most inappropriate and embarrassing times possible. So in order for you to be able to work through your grief, allow yourself to grieve in whatever way works for you. So whether you have the need to go to a mountaintop and scream as loud as you can with no one around, go ahead and do it. Or if it means having tears fall down your face as you're doing dishes in your kitchen, listening to the music you love, if that works for you, then do it. There's no one perfect way to deal with grieving. The important thing to do is to let your emotions out and let them process. Tears are not a bad thing. Emotions are not a bad thing. Emotions are part of the human experience. It's how you deal with them that matters. It should go without saying that going and vandalizing a building because you're angry about something, that is not a safe or okay way to deal with your emotions. But there are other ways that you can. You can journal. You can talk to other people. You can listen to music. You can dance. You can go for a run. There's lots of healthy ways that you can deal with overwhelming emotions to try to get a grip on them. And we'll be discussing those as we go through. So find a healthy way to deal with the emotions that you are feeling as you grieve the loss of a loved one. Tears have proven to be a very cathartic way of dealing with it. Just let them flow. And when you're done, it's just a great way to release how you're feeling. And you will often find that that might be all you need, is to just cry, to have a good cry, let the emotions go, and then you'll feel much more of a release from the emotions that have been pent up in your body. And when you are processing your emotions of grief, there are so many different ways that you can do it. You can start going through pictures or home movies that you had with that person. You could maybe write a song, write a book, write some short stories, write some poems about them. Listen to music that you both enjoyed. Go and visit locations that you used to like to go to, or go on a big trip of places that you never did get to go to together, or were places that they talked about that as they went through life. There's really no end of ways that you can express and work through your emotions as they come up. Remember that you are not being weak for showing your emotions and having powerful feelings about someone that has passed. It's actually a blessing that you loved someone so strongly in this life that you have these emotions when you realize they're not going to be around anymore. So be willing to express them alone, with other people. It can be very helpful for your children as well to be able to see the emotions that come up when a beloved pet dies, or someone close to you, or just an associate, because it will show them that it's okay for them to show these emotions as well. And you can show them how to do it in a healthy manner. And tears are not a bad thing. We don't need to be scared of our emotions. We just need to find a healthy, productive way to express them. As well, we need to realize that whether you knew that your loved one was going to pass in advance, or whether it was sudden, it really doesn't matter. It hurts just the same. And even though death is a part of our lives, it doesn't mean that it's fair. So feel the feelings, allow them to happen. Don't be scared of your feelings. They will pass. Just make sure that you're doing it in a healthy and safe environment. Let's move on to tip number 2, and that's showing yourself grace. Showing yourself grace is something we don't tend to do for ourselves as much as we should. We will show grace to others, to children, to pets, to friends. We will show grace to others much more readily than we will to ourselves. So when those tears start to fall in the most inappropriate places, in the grocery store, the lineup at the DMV, in school, at work, you never know when those emotions are going to pop up again for you. So show yourself grace. Again, as I said before, it's okay to cry, and it's okay to have these emotions come up. So you're going through, picking out your vegetables, and the tears start to fall. It's okay. And be okay with yourself. Show yourself grace. It doesn't matter how it may affect those around you. Just let it happen. Because it's natural. It's normal. Just let it happen and keep moving forward. Because as frequently as it may happen in the beginning, it won't continue that way forever. But if you get down on yourself for allowing it, calling yourself stupid for letting it happen, and trying to hide the tears, it's just going to make it worse. You're going to feel worse about yourself, and bottling your emotions, as I've mentioned before, is really unhealthy. It's only going to make it happen in a much bigger and explosive way in the future. So just let it happen. And just be at peace with the fact that you love them so much that they had this effect on you. And they would not want you to get down on yourself for that either. When you think about how you love other people, you want them to be happy. You want them to feel good about themselves. So give that grace to yourself. And it's okay that you feel that way, because it's hard adjusting to someone that you're used to having in your life every day, and now you can't reach out to them as you used to. So just be okay with that and say, you know what? Maybe even in that moment, just say, you know what? I really loved my dad. I miss him, and it's okay. Acknowledge it. Don't try to repress. So when you're going through the stages of grief, allow yourself the time that you need to grieve. Take some time off work or school or the big responsibilities that you have in your life at the moment. Give yourself some time to grieve. Some people, they want to jump back into work. And if that's you, ask yourself one question: why am I jumping back into work? Is it because I want to forget what's just happened? Is it a way to repress what's going on so you don't have to think about it? Because if that is a reason, if it's so you don't have to think about it, so that you don't have to deal with the emotions, so that you don't have to grieve, that's not a good reason to jump back into work. Give yourself the time Show yourself the grace by giving yourself the time you need to grieve. Take some time off. It's really helpful. I mean, for me, my father passed away from cancer in 2002, and I still have the thoughts that pop back into my mind about him. Sometimes they're really great memories, and sometimes they're shaded with grief and sadness. And both are okay. And I've learned not to beat myself up about it. I mean, sometimes I thought I'd be like, why am I thinking about that? Well, so if that thought comes up to you, like, why am I thinking about that memory? Why is that coming back to me? Stop and realize that that's a moment for you to think about why it's come back. Is this something you need to journal about? Is this something you need to talk with somebody else about to try to get a new perspective? But take that moment, if it is one that's shaded in negativity that you really don't want to think about anymore, take that moment to journal about it. Take that moment to look back in your brain and say, okay, why is this still coming up after all these years? And forgive yourself, forgive the other individual if that needs to happen. But take that moment to look at it, reframe it, and come up with a more positive learning experience from why that negative thought has come up to you. And you'll find that when you can start reframing it into a more positive light, those memories, the negative memories, the bad memories, you can they'll start to dissolve, and they won't come up as often, and you can come back with a more positive experience. Let's move on to be willing to talk to other people. I mean, science and research has shown that talking through your issues is way better than medication. Because the medication is only going to mask what's going on underneath. If you're not able to talk it through and come to a sense of peace in your own mind about whatever issue it is, whether it's grief or something else, or just a traumatic experience you've gone through, those thoughts are going to keep coming back because you haven't dealt with them. So be willing to talk it out. Now, I realize in some cultures, talking to other people, admitting depression, admitting mental health issues is still a big taboo, which is kind of crazy in 2025, that you can't discuss this with other people. I mean, emotions are okay. Doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. When my grandfather died, I think I was around 10, and when we got the phone call that he had passed, I still have the memory of my dad getting up from his chair I think we were watching Little House on the Prairie when we got the news. That's how vivid it still is in my mind. I still remember him walking from his chair to the window as the tears fell, because he didn't want us to see the tears, but we knew they were there. But knowing that my dad, a big, strong man like my dad, could cry for the loss of his father, it let me know that it was okay too. And he didn't show much emotion after that. He was very stoic after that, as was his nature. But knowing that it's okay for men to cry, boys to cry, girls to cry, women to cry, it's okay. It just shows how much love you had for that individual, and it's beautiful. So be willing to talk about it with others as well. Let the tears flow when it does. Another interesting thing that can happen when you talk to someone else, whether it's someone who knew the person who died or somebody, a therapist that's completely neutral, doesn't know who you're talking about, they can provide a different perspective that you weren't thinking of. If it's someone that knew the person, that experienced the same situation with them, they might have a totally different perspective of what was happening and what was going on in that time, or they could provide you with more information about that individual that might make you understand better that situation and why they might have responded in the way they did. And for a therapist or a completely neutral party that didn't even know the individual you're talking to, they can also provide you with a different perspective that you could look at it from that may make a huge difference for you. Plus, when you do talk out an issue with someone else, it takes it from your internal mind processing it, and it puts it out there into the world. And somehow, the way our brains work, just moving it from the inside to the outside releases a lot of the power that it holds over us. And even just hearing yourself say it, how it sounds in your mind and the effect it has in your mind, when you say it, you're like, wow, why was I even thinking that? It helps you release, it helps you process. So be willing to talk it out, whether it's with friends, family, or a therapist. It will really, really help you be able to put that situation where it belongs. Because as I mentioned before, if your brain can't comprehend the grief or the trauma that you've just gone through, it can lead you down into PTSD, it can lead you into depression and anxiety. You really need to be able to, your brain needs to be able to compartmentalize things where they belong. And once they understand why it happened and that it's okay, then your brain's able to move on. It doesn't feel like it needs to protect you from that situation or that person anymore. And you can move on. So this is just one of the best ways that you can manage your grief, is through talking it out with someone else. So our next big tip is journaling about your thoughts and feelings. I know there's a lot of people that just aren't into journaling. It's like, I don't have the time. I don't want it on paper. Somebody else might read it. And then what are they going to think about me? Well, it really doesn't matter what they think about you. If you're really worried about somebody else reading what you've journaled, write it out, shred it, burn it. That's a great way to make sure that nobody else sees it, but you still get the benefit of the journaling it, so that you can process the thoughts and feelings that you're having. Because that's what journaling does. It's like a big brain dump. You just dump all these thoughts and feelings and emotions on paper. You don't judge them at all. Then after you've finished, you feel like, okay, I've done it. This can usually take, anywhere between 5 minutes to 15 minutes. Set a timer. And everything that you can think of in that 10 to 15 minute period, once that timer goes off, okay, done. And then go back and look through all those thoughts and feelings. And that's when you can actually analyze them, look at them and go, is that real? Is that true? Is that helpful? And so even if it is, a lot of these thoughts, they're completely irrational, let's be honest. So you look at that thought and you go, yeah, that's not true. I know that's not true. Well, guess what? Cross it off. You know it's not true, you don't need to deal with it. Move on to the next one. Is it true? Well, even if it seems true, is it helpful? Honestly, is it helpful? Even if it's 100% true, is it a helpful thought? Well, no. If it's not a helpful thought, reframe it. Come at it from a different angle. The thought, my bank account is empty. Okay, it's true. Is that a helpful thought? Not really. It's going to lead you to anxiety and a lot of stress to know that your bank account is empty. But think about it. Do you have a paycheck that's coming in a week, in a day? Do you have other outstanding invoices that are coming to you that just haven't been paid yet? Can you sell something on Facebook Marketplace, for instance, or eBay? Is there a job you could go in, and a part-time job you could go and get, delivering groceries for somebody, or working at Walmart, whichever. Think about the options that could help you put more money into your bank account. And that is a more helpful way to look at, my banking account is empty. My bank account is empty. One avenue is to spiral into depression and anxiety because you don't know where your next meal is coming from. The positive side is to look at ways, like, well, I've got paycheck coming in a couple of days. Great. I'll go get I'll go get a job. I'll go get a new part-time job or something to try to make ends meet along the way, or sell something. Well, here's now some actual things you can do to help yourself in that time frame. And if you do need to go and get yourself a new part-time job, just focusing on getting that part-time job is going to take your mind off there not being anything in your bank account, and before you know it, there will be again. So, that's just a loose example of how you can take something that may be factual, but if you reframe it and look at ways you can change that and actual actionable steps, you can actually turn that totally around. And now you're not going to spiral into anxiety and depression. You're going to take steps to rectifying the situation. So that's just some basics on how journaling can really, really help. And then with the journaling, then you can start coming up with some really great ideas on how you can change things. You can come up, and when you're journaling, you can also come up with some really great memories you had about that person, so that when the negative ones might pop in, or the sadness about their loss, you can start thinking about the great times you had together. And you can turn around the periods of grief a lot faster if you've already prepared some happy thoughts along the way. So that just led right into creating positive memories about your loved one. This can be, just having pictures. We all have relationships are messy. They're complicated. So you can have good memories about people and bad ones, even if you were on good terms with the person that has died. So it's much nicer to think about the good, positive memories you had than all, the negative things that happen along the way, because that's just part of being human. It's part of relationships. So sit down. A really great way to do this is to gather together with friends or family that knew the one that has passed. And this could be separate from a funeral or memorial service. Get together for coffee or tea or something. Go to a park, go to the beach, wherever you want to gather, and just bring your pictures. Let everybody know what it's about. Have them bring their stories, their pictures, their just the good stuff about this person, and you can all discuss what your favorite memories of this person were. And this is just a really great way for you to grieve together, but also to have fun together with this person that you miss. And because you may have stories and pictures and things that others didn't know about them, and it's just a great way to have things prepared for when the sad thoughts come in. As I mentioned before, when the sad thoughts come in, we're not trying to mask them. I also, as mentioned before, if a really sad thought or memory comes in to light, put it down, write it down for something to journal about, to something to really think about. Why is this thought resurfacing? How can I come at this from a positive light? But if you've got all these other positive memories, you can then go, you know what? Yes, that happened, and I forgive them. I forgive myself for the part I had to play in that. But this is the memory that I want to focus on. And over time, that when you keep replacing the negative with the positive, our brains, the neuroplasticity in our brains, every time you think a thought, negative or positive, it creates a groove in your brain. So the more you think of a negative thing, or the more you think about it, the deeper that groove gets. So if you have a negative thought and you keep making it deeper and deeper and deeper by ruminating on that negative experience, it's going to be the thought that comes up the most. So what you need to do is to replace it with a positive reframe, a positive thought that you're like, you know what? I don't think that way anymore. I'm going to think this instead. And the more you think the positive thought instead, the deeper that groove gets, and the weaker the other groove gets. And that way, the positive groove is going to take over from the negative groove, and it's going to come up less and less and less. And that positive thought is going to be the one that comes up the most. So this is what creating the happy memories can do for you. So I highly recommend giving that a try. Gather together if you can. Do it by yourself. It's just as powerful as doing it with a group, except that within your group, you may learn more incredible things about the person that you've just lost than you knew before. And you can build each other up and help each other work through the grief of losing that loved one. So this leads us into our next tip, which is forgiving them and forgiving yourself. I mentioned this a couple times already, but when someone dies, the chances of reconciling, the chances of working through issues you may have had, they're gone, and there is no going back. So in that situation, we need to forgive them, and we need to forgive ourselves. And of course, some of those issues may have way more damaging repercussions than others, of course. But in this situation, if you don't forgive them for that, you're only hurting yourself. And while they're alive too, when you don't forgive someone else, you're the only one that's being hurt. Because sometimes, even if you tell them about the situation, they just may not care. And if they've died, there's no longer an opportunity for them to care. So you need to forgive them and forgive yourself so that you can move on, and you can let go of the grief. You can let go of the situation that needed to be forgiven in the first place. And in that way, you can move on with life. And when those thoughts come up again, you can actually tell yourself, you know what? I've forgiven them. Or if it's something really hard to forgive, one thing that I do is I actually pray to God and ask Him to help me forgive them so that I can move on. To say, you know what, I really want to forgive them. I'm having a really tough time with this right now. Please help me to forgive so that I can replace that negative situation with more positive memories. And in that way, that can really help relieve your guilt, is just by forgiving them and forgiving yourself. Because honestly, once someone has died, there is no going back. You can't do anything else but forgive. Because if you don't, you're going to stay stuck in that situation, and it's only going to hurt you and can lead into depression and anxiety. And we really don't want to go there. So yeah, give it a try. Forgive yourself, forgive them, and allow your body to process that grief and let it go. Our next tip for managing your grief is to accept that death is part of life. So this may not be a popular thing to say, but the one thing you are guaranteed after you're born is that you will die. And that's hard because we love our family and friends, we love our pets, we love those that affect our lives. And it's such a blessing to have them in our lives. But we do need to recognize that as hard as we try, one day they will die. And trying to push that fact under the rug and pretend that maybe they won't is not realistic, and it's not helpful. We need to accept that everyone, no matter how much we love them, is going to die. And in 2025, our medical system has just, the stuff they can do is absolutely phenomenal. What they've learned, the lives that they can save. It's the procedures that they've come up with. I mean, God has really inspired these physicians and doctors with incredible gifts in how to heal. But unfortunately, with our bodies, once sin entered the world, the penalty for sin is death. That's just the way it is. And so one day, as healthy as we live, as much as we work on it, as much as we spend on our medical system and everything that comes with it, one day our bodies will break down and we will die. It's just that simple. You can be the wealthiest person in the world, have the best access to the best doctors and technology. And no matter what Hollywood wants to tell us in their fantasy movies, one day we will die. It's just a part of life. So accepting that will help you go a long way in being able to manage your grief. And of course, it's so much harder when it's a child that hasn't really had their life to live. But even the joy that they've brought to you and to those around them in the short time they've been with you is something to be so incredibly grateful for. Because tomorrow is not guaranteed. It's not. So we need to be so grateful for the time that we've had with these, whether they're people or pets or, the home, the job, the colleague, whatever that thing that you're grieving is. We need to be grateful for the time we have had with them. Now, how can we make this easier for those around us? Well, when we do become adults, you can create a will. You can have what you want to happen after you pass, and you can have a living will as a living will. And a living will comprise things of a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate, for if you're in a really horrible car accident or if you're terminally ill and you stop breathing, you don't want medical intervention at that point. You want to be allowed to pass with dignity. And that will totally take a lot of pressure off your loved ones if they know that this is what you want for your end of life care. You can also have all your passwords and things available for your family and friends for if there was an accident to happen, that they know where that is. If they know where the keys are for lock boxes and things like that. If they know what kind of insurance programs you might have or where to find the documentation that's necessary for if you do pass suddenly, so that it's not quite as much of a struggle for them. You could have your entire funeral arranged already. The songs you want, the hymns you'd like. Do you want to be buried in a casket? Would you like to be cremated? Where would you like the ashes put? All that kind of stuff. If you have that outlined in advance for your loved ones, then it's one less thing that they need to fight about after you're gone. So having those kind of things available will make the transition for your loved ones a whole lot better, a whole lot easier for them. I mean, of course, you can't stop them fighting about everything, but if you have some things that you know would be really important for you for your end-of-life care or to happen after you've passed, have that in place in advance and let them know verbally as well what your requests are and how you would like things to be handled, and then it won't be another hurdle that they need to jump through or to manage once you're gone. And this leads us into our tip about managing grief for children. And I know for me, wanting to protect my children from anyone that would hurt them in any possible way, any situation that would cause them any difficulties, that really triggers my mama bear instincts. And I don't want them to have to suffer at all. But that's also not very realistic, because one day they do need to grow up and be self-sufficient adults. And if you overprotect them, they're not going to be able to do that. And the same comes to dealing with grief and death. So our instinct is normally to, don't let them see someone that's dying. Don't let them see them in the casket. Protect them. You don't want them to hurt. You don't want them to suffer. But you know what? If you want to grow their emotional intelligence, which is very, very helpful, the kids need to know what life is about, and death is a part of life. And it can also be hurtful for them if they're excluded from all these big gatherings, discussions of the funeral, going to the funeral, seeing them in the casket, all these kind of discussions. They need to know the truth, because if they're not included in those discussions And those situations, they can feel like they weren't important enough to be there, that nobody really cared, that they're a lesser member of the family, which is completely untrue. Plus, we need to recognize that as imaginative as adults can be, children's imaginations can sometimes eclipse us well and beyond what we ever thought was happening. So if they're not getting truthful answers from us about death and dying and what happened to their grandmother, their grandfather, as they're dying, after they died, if they don't get that truth, they're going to come up with something in their imaginations which could be way, way worse than what actually happened. So the big tip with dealing with grief for children, be honest, be truthful about what's going on, include them. If their relative is in the hospital dying, let them see it. Give them a chance to say goodbye. I mean, so many of us don't get that opportunity to say goodbye to a loved one that, if they die suddenly, or we're just not in the same country or in the same city, we don't get there in time, and that can be really hard on an adult, and that can be devastating for a child. So give them that child to see and to be able to say goodbye. Give them that opportunity. That will be very important for them as they grow older. Also, answer whatever questions they have as truthfully as you can. They may keep asking the same question, but they could ask the same question, or they could ask different questions around it. Just what they want to hear. It's not like they think you're lying to them. They just want to keep being reassured that they're getting the same answer to that question. So include the kids. Show them that having emotion is a good thing. Show them healthy ways to release their emotions. Journaling, drawing pictures, listening to music, watching movies, whatever it is that will help that child process through their emotions will be really important. Most of all, show them that not to bottle their emotions, but that releasing their emotions in a healthy way is a completely acceptable and the best way for them to honor the person or pet or that has passed. And this brings us to tip number 10, and that is clinging to your faith in God. So this has the ultimate way that I have managed my grief in the past. I mean, I have gone through a lot of deaths. My grandfather when I was about 10, and then lots in between there. But it was when my father died in 2002 from cancer that's when my big breakthrough came. And it was when he had died in the May of 2002, and I was not looking forward to Father's Day that was happening in June of 2002 because, well, my father had died. But it was during that Sunday church service for Father's Day that I had my huge breakthrough. And this thought just came into my mind that even though my earthly father was gone, my heavenly Father would always be with me. And, just thinking about it brings tears to my eyes because it's so vivid. And it just was just a wave of peace went over with me when I thought about that. Because as much as I love my father, and I truly did, and still do, knowing that my Heavenly Father would always be there for me was just, it meant everything. Because God and Jesus, they love us so much that, they died. Jesus died for us. And they want us to be happy and to know that I can talk to them anytime. I can work through any problem. They'll always be there for me. They'll always take care of me. They're always watching out for me and for my best interest. It just took such a weight off my shoulders. And I've been able to use that knowledge for every death that's happened after that as well. Because even though those people will no longer be there for me to chat with or visit on a daily, basis, I still know that God is taking care of them, and He'll always be there to take care of me. I know that they're not suffering anymore, they're not hurting, and He will take care of them. And He's always going to be there for me. And that is just it's just such a great relief to have that knowledge. And the other great thing about being Christian is the knowledge that even though life on this earth is finite, I mean, when sin entered the world, death was the result of sin. But with Jesus' death on the cross, He took our sin so that we could be with Him for eternity. So all those that have died loving Jesus, accepting Jesus as their Lord and Savior, they will be with Him for eternity. And those that are alive, when Jesus comes the second time, He will take us up with them as well. So whether you've lived loving Jesus and accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior, or whether you died with that belief, we are all going to be together with Him for eternity. He told the disciples when He was still on earth that He was going to heaven to prepare a place for them and for all those that love and accept Him. And so we know it's true. That's a fact we can all bank on. So having that knowledge brings me such peace and hope for the future that even though I know that there are people that I don't get to see every day in this earth, I will get to see my dad and my grandparents in heaven, and loads of other cousins and friends and family members that have passed before me. I will get to see them again. And that brings me incredible joy and hope for the future, because death is not final for those that believe in God. There is a place that we are going to be with them for eternity. So this loss, this absence of them is only temporary. It's only for a little while. We will get to see them again. And that is something that you only get if you believe in Jesus and accept Him as your personal Lord and Savior. So if this is something that you would like more information on, please reach out to me at andrea@nopainallgain.ca, and I'll be more than thrilled to chat with you about this, completely free, of course, because I just love to share my love for Jesus with others so that you can have that experience as well. And with this knowledge, we can have Bible studies, we can just chat, but I would love for you to know Jesus the way I do, and to have this assurance on earth that that's why the Bible says death no longer has its sting, because we know it's not forever. And you can only have that when you cling to Jesus and to cling to God and the promises He's given us in the Bible. So thank you so much for joining me today. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here with me. I hope that you have found this helpful. If you would like to discuss any of these things I've talked about with grief, again, reach out to me at andrea@nopainallgain.ca, and I'd be thrilled to chat with you about it. I will be linking some resources below so that you can, that I have found very helpful in my search to find some answers about grief, and so that you can take a look as well and see if they have got more information that you would find helpful. So again, thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful week. I wish you all the best in 2025 and all the years to follow. And I hope to see you next week. Bye for now. Did you know that one-on-one coaching is a great way to break through the barriers that are holding you back in life? Well, that's what I do. I'm a health and wellness coach that helps people break down those little things that are holding them back. I help them to look through their life through a different lens, a different perspective, so that they can see the awesome things that they can achieve with just a few adjustments in their lives. I also specialize in fibromyalgia and chronic illness. So if those are things that are holding you back and you would love some tips to that will help you reduce your pain levels, regain your energy, so that you can live the life of your dreams again, reach out to me at Andrea@nopainallgain.ca, and I would love to have a one-on-one free consultation with you to see if working together would be a great fit, and then we can start working together to rebuild your life one step at a time. Also, if you are dealing with FM or chronic illness and you'd love some tips on how to manage them, some practical ways to make your life better, I have just written a book on that exact subject. It's Tips for Living with Fibromyalgia and Chronic Illness. It's now available on Amazon. I'll leave those links in the below as well, so that you can get yourself a copy today and find some ways to reduce your pain level, even all the way down to zero. And so I hope you take advantage of that. Again, thank you for joining me. I hope you know what an incredible person you are, how much God loves you, and that He cannot imagine this world without you, and that the world would not be the same without you in it. Have a great week. Have a wonderful year, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.